Welcome back to the show. And so, quite importantly, we begin with the economy today with specific focus on Nigeria's currency, particularly following the report of the World Bank Pulse on African currencies, which has listed Nigeria's currency, the naira, as one of the worst performing alongside the Ethiopian birr and the South Sudanese pound. And of course, this is coming at this time when the government, this administration, is providing intervention in the economy with the reforms on forex, the removal of subsidy. So, what sense do we make of this report, particularly also because of the World Bank's position on Nigeria's economy? So, joining us this morning to look at some of these issues, we have Mr. Roman Oseghale. He is a business and economic intelligence analyst. He's also the CEO, Intel Serve. Good morning and welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't know if you're sensing what seems to be a contradiction in the disposition of the World Bank towards Nigeria's economy, often in its interpretation of what exactly is happening. On the one hand, it says that the reforms are needed, removal of subsidy, it supports it. On the other hand, it says that some of the reforms are hurting the vulnerable. Do you sense a double speak? Do you sense that this international financial institution is unable to make up its mind exactly about the trajectory that Nigeria should be going to, such that it can come out on the other side?
Thank you for having me. I think the World Bank is correct, right? The reforms are needed. We can't continue to fund subsidized consumption. And on the other hand, the reforms are hurting the people because you're not investing in the people, right? I've always said this, that when you look at the budget every year, right, the budget is the primary instrument of economic expansion for the year, for a fiscal year. When you look at the composition of the budget, you see a 70% recurrent or 75% recurrent expenditure, and you see a 30% capital expenditure. So if you're going to help the people, right, the budget has to be a reverse. It has to be like maybe a 70% capital expenditure because that's what builds wealth. That's what is going to help the people, lift them up, and then whatever reforms you're doing, they'll be able to absorb that shock. But as long as the people cannot afford the reforms that you're doing, basically you might just be plunging them into deeper poverty.
But if you consider also that it is from this same financial institution that Nigeria has obtained quite a number of loans, and at the beginning of the administration, there were also talks that some of the data for the social intervention program was, supported. The gathering of that data was supported by the international financial institution. So don't you see also that there's some form of inconsistency there? Because the subnationals have also countered that data, and those reforms are ongoing at the moment. The distribution of funds, 75,000 naira to households and all of that, but we're not seeing the impact on the economy. Is this concerning for you?
Well, it's a bit concerning, right? The international financiers or banks, right, they run like a business. If you come to me and say you want to come borrow money, all I need to do is run your numbers, crunch them, and if I see that you're eligible to get these loans, right, I'll give them to you. But what we should be looking at is these interventions. Are they for productivity or for consumption? You're giving people interventions. Are they meant to build up businesses that will help sustain them? Or are they just going to buy things, consume them, and then go back to square one? You understand? And I think that though the World Bank is correct, but I think they should also look at the possibility of helping government channel these funds into productivity rather than consumption, because most of the interventions that government has been collecting have not been going into the productivity of the people. So if you look at, let's just look at the scenarios of MSMEs, right? You'll find out that most of them are struggling. what is government doing to help those SMEs stand on their feet? Cost of the diesel, cost of petrol to run your, then you look at how much you need, right, to pay for electricity bills. These are the things that are killing small scale businesses. And these things are what the World Bank, I believe that the World Bank should insist that government should invest in, right, rather than just giving handouts. The handouts will not last for too long. But when you build this sustainability model that will sustain these businesses, then on the long run, right, these businesses can be sustainable. I can take care of myself. You can also take care of yourself.
Well, it's a very interesting situation we find ourselves, and it just speaks to how we need creative thinking, right, in solving some of these challenges. And I'd like to ask you, just how creative would you describe this government so far? Right. So there's textbook, there's textbook. Maybe you should just go ahead with the response. Okay. And then I can follow.
Okay. So, I sent in some slides, right? I don't know if
we can walk through them.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Now, I'd say this, right? The problem we have today is the problem of trade deficits, and the trade deficit is cutting across the whole of Africa. I just did a study recently, and I found out that of the 10 biggest economies in Africa, right, 6 have accumulated only only 4, right, have accumulated trade surpluses between 2014 and 2023. The other 6 have accumulated trade deficits. Now, when you look at what is on the screen, right, we've been recording that. I've brought this slide here a couple of times.
Time and again, we can almost tell.
Yeah, exactly. This is the bane of all our problems. And if you look at the countries, right, that were mentioned by the World Bank, they've all, from Nigeria to Ethiopia to Algeria, Morocco, Kenya. All these countries have been recording trade deficits since 2014.
Break down trade deficits to the
So the trade deficit is when your imports, right, supersedes your exports. It's just like a balance of trade. So you have more imports coming in than exports. And the bane of that is that once you have trade deficit, you have budget deficit. Budget deficit leads to more borrowing to fund the budget, right? And as you borrow more, subsequent years, the little you make, you use most of it to service debt. So as the trade deficit gets bigger, right, and larger, you find out that your revenues and resources starts to thin out over the years because you need more of your small revenue to service the loans that you get to fund your budget.
So in simpler terms, because I want us to break it down into pieces. So if we're not exporting, it means that we're not producing as much as we ought to.
Okay.
That may mean the cost of production, the business environment, and all of that.
It's not just that. Right. See, let me explain this with a joke, right? Which I said in a forum recently. 2 angels were listening to morning prayers, right? And one of the angels said to the other one, "Where is that?" And the guy, "Oh, that's Africa." And he said, "Oh, what country is that?" The guy praying. And the other angel said, "Oh, that's Nigeria." I said, "Oh, where is he praying from?" He said, "Aso Rock." And he said, "So why is he praying for war?" And the other angel looked at him and said, "Oh, he's not praying for war for his people. He's praying for war in the Middle East." And the other was like, "Why?" He said, "Well, he's been in office 3 years and his people think he's not performing. Without war in the Middle East, his economy doesn't grow."
Because
of price of crude oil.
Yes. And then the angel said, "Well, we gave him the war, but we'll not give him the quantities." Now, the 2 things.
That's oil production quantity.
Good. Now, there are 2 things that determine or have determined the progress, success of any administration, any president, any head of state, or any regime in power since 1970. Price and quantities of crude. And those 2 things are orchestrated by either wars or destabilization in the Middle East. So it's just like some people are just sitting down and we're all praying for God to give us war in the Middle East so that our economy can grow. The truth is this. I've always said, if any president, head of state, anybody comes and brags that, oh, we had a GDP of X amount or that amount during my regime, we had this economic growth, go and match the wars. Look, this is slide 3, right? From slide 3, go to slide... The first one that shaped our economy was the Yom Kippur War of 1973. When we made so much money and the head of state then said money was not our problem, but what? How to spend it. The next one after this was, go to slide 9. It was the return of the Ayatollah. The Ayatollah, that's the Iran, right? When the Ayatollah came into Iran, the Iranian Revolution in 1979. And then from there, go to slide 11. These are the things that have shaped the next slide, slide 11. You see, Iran-Iraq War, 1980 to 1988. The Gulf War, 1990. The Iraq War, 2003 to 2011. The Arab Spring, 2010 to 2012. Then now the Russia-Ukraine war of what? 2022. We don't know when it's going to end. Now, when you match all these scenarios, right? These conflicts and wars against our economic growth. Go back to slide 6. Match them along the timelines. You find that, go to slide 6, please. You find that that's where we've always had economic growth. And it also depends on how wide, right? How many years those wars took place.
Because I was going to say the Israel, Hamas war has been on for some time now. We're still doing less than $100.
No. And during that time, all of these times that you've taking us through, have our currencies been stronger?
Good. Now go to slide 8. Go to slide 8. The only time, right? Go to slide 8. Okay. Now, when you look at if you look at 2004, right, to 2008, when Professor Soludo was governor of Central Bank, right, that period, something happened. Now, from 133 naira to $1, it dropped to what? It dropped to 118 naira, right, in 2008. Why? Now, go back to slide 5. Go back to slide 5. Okay. Now, look at from 2004 to 2012, right? That was when the US-Iraq war was going on. That was when we had this massive oil boom, right? Like what happened in the 70s, repeating itself in the 2000s, right? So your currency is a function of innovation and productivity, right? So if you're not productive, but you have a mineral resource that you're selling, you'll make a lot of dollars, right? So it's a function of pull and push, right? So during this period, we sold so much. And remember, this was when the amnesty also started, right? They settled all the Niger Delta guys. Oil production rose to about 2.3 million barrels a day. So we had price and quantities on our side. So there was no issue. And because that price and quantity was there, Nigeria was flooded with petrodollars, like what happened in the 70s.
We've talked about the challenges.
I just get a sense that we're looking at the wrong place continually. And the deceit is that, oh, the dollars are coming in at that time. You talk about innovation. Yeah. We're not looking at other areas for productivity.
Nigeria is not a productive economy. Nigeria is an economy dependent on war that is orchestrated by the destabilization and wars. Nigeria is an economy dependent on crude oil, right? That is orchestrated by wars and destabilization of the Middle East.
So we need to then know how to turn that, which is why I say, if we are not producing as we ought to. So what is that thing that we
Government needs to bring out policies. See, it's very frustrating, to be very honest with you. Government needs to bring out policies, right, that will enforce local production and also enforce local usage. I'll give you a scenario. When Lee Kuan Yew was transforming Singapore, scarce forex was only meant for 3 things. 1, medicines and drugs. That you and I must be at top form. We must be healthy at all times, right? They couldn't compromise that. 2, raw materials. 3, machineries. So what was he thinking? And what was he engraving in the hearts of the people and in the minds of the people? Go and import these raw materials, import the machineries, turn them to finished goods and sell to the world. This was Singapore that was coming to Africa to borrow money in the 70s. Today, as at the end of 2022, Singapore's exports, total export was over 900 billion. This is a country that is smaller than Lekki Peninsula, 5.7 million people. But when you look at, then turn to the last slide, please, slide 12.
So we're just anchoring that.
Yeah. So when you look at sub-Saharan Africa, right, you see 47 countries, 1.35 billion people. Total exports of goods and services only stood at about 540 billion US dollars. That's why you see the poverty concentrated in sub-Saharan Africa. We're not productive. We're not a productive economy. We're just a mineral resource economy. And governments, it's not just only to put policies, right? See, there is no economy that has grown, that has remained sustainable without government's help. I was watching a video on social media yesterday and I was almost moved to tears. Davido's father was talking about his power plant and how some people in government were hell-bent on frustrating it and saying to him that it will not see the light of the day. See, there is no economy that has ever grown or remained prosperous without positive government policies to help push these
domestic
people.
production.
Yes.
That's a fantastic place to anchor.
Actually, government even makes people go and read the book Dynasties, right? How Europe built its dynasties. They identify families that had manufacturing capabilities, and government made them. Good. You go and produce tire. You go and produce shoes. You go and produce fabric, so that we will stop importing these things. They give them this money and give them like a 50-year
moratorium.
Yes.
And we could speak to the vehicle manufacturing companies, you know, and the lack of support for it and all of that. Look, it's an ongoing conversation, but we must anchor at this point.
We just got to gear 5, but we'll to continue this.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much,
It's
sir.
quite interesting, that part of conversation, because a lot of people say, would we have monopoly? Would we have challenges and all of that?
Go look at what the US government is doing for Elon Musk. You'll be amazed. They won't, because you're bringing back the proceeds into the economy. Companies like Innocent, Momas Meters, these people they are trying. Government will look for how to replicate, talk to them, replicate these models in the 6 geopolitical zones. Give them the money. But protect that market.
Do you get the sense that this administration is looking away from the oil and is doing much more than paying
Let me tell you the truth,
lip service to economic diversification?
I will say this. Our leaders since I won't even call them leaders. The people that have governed this country, that have led this country since 1970, when we moved away from productivities of the 60s, they never helped this country. The truth is, that generation got the best of everything and left the worst of everything.
All right. We must thank you very much, Mr. Roman Oseghale, business and economic intelligence analyst and head consultant CEO, IntelServe Incorporated. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.